Hey, friends, it's your intrepid warrior, David Land, Julie, with Margaret Katz Can on the Leadership Deep Dive Show. Hey, Margaret, long time no see.
I know. Hey, David, we've both been on a little bit of vacation. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, and I was in
Yeah,
Colorado, you were in Maine, and our guest,
yeah.
John Mollura. Welcome, John.
Hey, what is up, David and Margaret?
He was in Texas, so here we all are on Zoom, recording from our home offices. And Margaret, I had a really cool conversation with John a few weeks ago, and he's a former NASA and elite US military field testing leader turned leadership coach. He's a keynote speaker, and he's the author of an upcoming book, Let It Fly, Stop Overthinking, Take Action, and Live with Confidence. Well, that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive in, he's coached more than 400 high performing professionals, including all the chiropractors in the United States, apparently.
That might be overreaching, but I'll take it. Fair portion.
All right. And speaks around the world, helping capable leaders quiet the mental noise, get clear on what matters, and take action before they feel fully ready. His core message, overwhelm isn't a sign of incapability, it's a sign of too many competing priorities. Clarity comes first, confidence follows action. And as Margaret and I are, Margaret's farther along the intuitive development path than I am, but I'm catching up to her. And we like to take action from intuition uh, without overthinking things too much. But that's kind of where we're headed today. Like we live in a world where it's heavily left brain driven, the rational analytical mind, and we got to have data and we got to run the data through the AI, and then we have to have another AI bot interpret the data, and then we have to have our AI brain read the interpretation of the AI, and then before you know it, the opportunity's gone. So what do you have to say about this?
Man, I saw this in my 15 years where I worked in the space program, right? I started working in the space program in 2001, and we were working on flight missions for NASA, but a lot of them would never get out of the test and development phase. And I'm like, what is going on here? We have 3D modeling, rapid prototyping, like all the things, right? Why could dudes with like slide rules and white button up, short sleeve shirts in the 60s make this happen in like a couple years and get into space? And what it came down to is there was just too much opportunity I observed for risk reduction. And by that I mean we were working on a landing system for what was to be like the Artemis capsule. And it took forever to do it because they kept running through like, okay, well, what happens if one of the parachutes goes out? Okay, what happens if two of the parachutes goes out and we're at our secondary landing site in Africa and the surface winds are the 50-year storm and they try to land and it's like, guys, what are we doing? And the irony was the test pilots, like the people who would actually be in harm's way that eventually would be testing these things, they were always saying like, we know enough, like let's go. But there
Mhm,
was such a risk aversion
mhm,
because of the litigious society like we've kind of evolved into that it would
mhm,
really slow things down. So when you talk about like loading all the data and all the things, like I really observed that, and it actually became, it hamstringed us from getting the
mhm.
real data out there because my mentor always said, one good test is worth 1,000 opinions.
Yeah, love that. Love that.
Yeah, this idea of like so many scenarios to run and the overwhelm that comes from that.
Yeah.
First, just to share, like whenever I go into this territory, I go to this scene in a movie, which I know David is a giant movie guy, but the movie The Hurt Locker.
Mm.
And when our hero is back from defusing bombs and he gets lost in the cereal aisle at the supermarket and he just stands there absolutely paralyzed by the number of choices. And
Yeah.
I also feel that way in the cereal aisle. And it's such a beautiful metaphor
Yeah.
for what it feels like to be overwhelmed by possibilities. And it kind of sounds like that's what you're talking about. And I would love to just hear your, like, t talk to us about overwhelm. It's such a big topic right now, John.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's not we're overwhelmed not because we don't have enough information. It's just it's information overload.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
I see time and time again these capable professionals that have a litany of things they've accomplished and things they've done. To your point, Margaret, a lot of times they're just paralyzed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what it comes down to is they lack the clarity of what to do next. So whenever clarity collapses, like action just stalls out or doesn't move forward in the way we want, because one of two things happen when there's no clarity. People either get paralyzed or they just kind of go off willy-nilly and say, well, I'm just going to do something,
Right.
which, there's something to be said for that, but sometimes you end up like way off target. So that's why I really help people with
Mhm.
is distill out what the next right action is from all of that information coming at them.
Well, I like what you said earlier about your mentor, one good test beats 1,000 simulations or something like
Yeah,
that, you
one good
said.
test is worth 1,000 opinions.
Okay. Yeah, and Margaret and I like to use because you know, educationally came up through physics and material science, and I
Mhm.
was always more of a experimentalist than a theorist.
Yeah,
And so I like to use the word let's do an experiment, but you have to you have to design a thoughtful experiment.
for
Like let's
sure.
go test it. Let's go, rather than try to deduce, deductive reason and logical reasoning, what may or may not happen. Let's design an experiment and
Mhm.
see what happens. And I gotta believe like this is the way chiropractors are like hands-on people. Like, yes, they can look at an MRI, they can look at an X-ray, they can ask you, you know, John, have you been rucking around again? Rucking around. And you'll be like, yes, I was rucking around again and my shoulders hurt. And but then they put their hands on you
Right.
and they feel you. And they say, well, how does that feel? And then uh, like Stymie and the Little Rascals, he just takes the Dickie Moore's head and goes, and his neck is completely healed. So say more about just that experiential aspect of getting out of the never-ending loop of analysis.
Right. So a lot of times what happens is there's not clear direction communicated top from the top down from leadership. And God bless the middle managers of the world, who are just being told what to do and then trying to lead the team with an incomplete data set. So since we're on the leadership deep dive here, whenever I talk with people about leadership, what builds high performing teams? Like I was very fortunate to work with, alongside like doing testing for like special forces and test pilots. And those high performing teams at the core of it, between the leaders and those that are there actually executing, is trust. And it's a cycle. So leaders are responsible for three things to build that trust. They're responsible for clarity, direction, and then support. And then the teams, to build that trust from the leader, they're responsible for three things. They're responsible for number one, remaining in alignment with the clear direction that the leader should have done, right? They're also responsible for taking action. And then the one where a lot of leaders don't present this opportunity is the teams are actually responsible for making the decisions. The leader makes the decisions on the front end when they figure out what the direction is. But the teams, if a leader is doing their job right, they're empowering their teams to make a decision. Because if your teams aren't making decisions, then they're just followers, right?
Mhm.
They're just doers. They're just out there doing the thing. Your job as a leader is and to build a high performing team is to have team members that you're supporting and trusting because they're executing and making decisions that remain in alignment with your directions that you've given.
I would add maybe one more dimension to that. We could add
Yeah.
lots of dimensions to
Oh,
that.
for sure. For sure. Yeah,
For the
three works for
audience,
a
it's
framework
always,
though.
I know three always works to get started, but there's something about, um, there's been a lot of work now on psychological safety on teams, and there's something about when you say, the team has to go execute or make decisions. There's something also the leader needs to provide, which is a safe space for failure.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, and I would argue that that falls into the support that the leader's offering. So
Yeah.
support could be making sure they have the finances, the time, the budget. I don't know if they need a forklift for the job, providing that. But support can also be just like you said, David, like allowing that opportunity for failure. And one of my bosses, who was a fantastic boss, his name was Carl. Whenever we would screw something up, right, it didn't always go according to plan. We'd kind of come in, all sweaty and dusty from whatever we'd just done out in the field, and it didn't work out, boss. And he'd be like, "All right, what happened?" We'd tell him, and he goes, "All right, I don't recall you guys making this mistake before." We'd always say, "No, Carl." He's like, "Good. I want you to learn from it. And if you ever make this mistake again, I'm going to be so pissed." And his point was, go ahead and make new mistakes. Don't repeat the old ones. Learn from them. And that's an example of that support and providing that space that a leader does provide his teams to fail, but then learn from it.
Mhm, mhm. What are your thoughts on it, on this, Margaret? Where's
I
your
don't I
intuition
don't want my
taking?
chiropractor making mistakes. That's literally
That's that's
but
true.
yes, I certainly, I think, you know, David and I have done a lot of work in the nonprofit space, and weirdly, it may be one of the most failure resistant. And I don't mean that they, that's not what I mean. Like they are so resistant to making mistakes. Like there's so little space and forgiveness about things not going well in the nonprofit world. It's
Mhm.
always really striking to me how much in contrast it is with scientific communities, startup communities
Mm.
where they just expect to make mistakes and learn from them. And it is fascinating how many cultures, office cultures, where it's like, we don't mess up, failure's
Right,
not an option. And
Yeah.
right.
that's kind of what I'm thinking about is that culture.
And why do you think
Yeah.
that is with nonprofits?
I think they don't remember that their donors have latitude for that. I mean, I think
Mm.
they get very into wanting to present a shiny story about the work that they're doing and the, children that they're
Mm.
serving or the this or the that. And they forget that like good stories have plot twists,
Right.
right? They forget that part. And they
Yeah.
forget that their donors for the most part are business people, right? Like they actually do understand
Yeah.
this stuff. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
do you see
Mm.
something different there, David, from your years in that world?
Oh, absolutely. I knew that you were going to go there. I think there is a fear that if we make a mistake or we screw up right out in the field, that that's gonna, it's the racket of we want to look good and avoid looking bad. That old
Yeah.
racket, we've talked about. I use that all the time because it's a natural human thing. You want to look good and avoid looking bad, except to the point where it paralyzes you and you're not taking any risks. That's the word you use, John. Or, you know, in the, it can also lead to the complete out of integrity behavior of hiding breakdowns, hiding failures, and I've seen that. Um, so there is, I think it's quite pervasive, and not just in the nonprofit world. I think also in corporate in
Yeah.
corporate America, you'll see that. Um, and I think that's just a natural tendency, human tendency to want, to just look good and avoid looking bad.
Sure.
But like we're saying here is donors, leaders, managers will give more grace than what maybe folks on the front line are thinking about.
Right. And I think a lot of that comes back to something really powerful. And we all do this as humans, is laying on the stories that we have based on our past experiences, assumptions. And one of my coaches said something that like really changed my life. He said I was spiraling about something on a coaching call. And he said, John, you need to separate the data from the drama, right? You need to look at the facts, brother, and see what is true, like what a camera would have recorded in the moment, and then separate that from all these stories, all this drama that you're putting on top of it. And that's just part of the human condition is we're going to put on these stories on top of everything based on our experiences. The challenge is not stopping that. The challenge is building the awareness to pause and separate out what's true and what story am I putting on. And now, how can I make a decision based on what the facts actually say?
But this is sort of, I mean, it's an interesting and slippery dance between your left brain and your right brain,
Right?
right?
Absolutely.
We can't throw either one of them under the bus here.
Right.
Mhm,
So we're trying to be leaders.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so just getting into a space of only intuition or only stories is
Right.
sounds like you're sort of saying not any better than only facts all the time for everything.
Right. Right. Because especially if you're a leader, like there's people involved. Like we're not leading robots. So like there has to be,
Not yet, and who
well,
knows? The robots
I
may
don't
be
know.
leading us
I don't know. I think
over
someone made a movie
over
about
a
that with
cliff.
Schwarzenegger back in the
Exactly,
80s.
exactly. Um, you mentioned, when we were talking about coming on the show and how overthinking how we can sabotage ourselves.
Yeah.
Margaret and I would call this the hyper rational saboteur in our
Mm,
coaching methodology.
gotcha.
So say a little bit more about how this this hyper rational overthinking can how we sabotage ourselves with that.
Yeah. So a lot of times people think that I'll wait until I feel confident or skilled enough to do the thing, right? They treat confidence as a prerequisite for action.
Mm.
Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. Confidence is actually the product of taking action when you have the bejesus scared out of you, right? So, being a recovering engineer, I got a formula for you, but it's easy. It's easy. A plus B equals C. Action plus bravery equals confidence. You get to be confident after you do the thing, not before. The reason why I throw bravery in there is because where people misconstrue bravery, they're like, "Well, that's not me, John. I'm not brave." I say, "Why?" And they say, "Well, because I'm terrified." Yeah. To which I always say, "Perfect. You don't get to be brave unless you're scared." Because
Right.
bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is taking the action even when you're scared to death. That's bravery.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you're able to take action amidst the fear and be brave, that's when the confidence shows up afterwards, not before.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Margaret and I uh, work with a lot of leaders in the nonprofit world, as she mentioned, and many of them are fundraisers. And what I saw when I was on the front line of fundraising, led a fundraising team, as the computer systems came in, um, people got caught up in the rational and like I'll go out and talk to this person when I have all the information.
Mm.
Right, Margaret?
Yeah, I mean, not my style of fundraising,
Not
but
my
for sure I
No,
do that
exactly.
all the time. Yeah,
My style was I'm gonna go. I have like almost no information about this person, but I'm gonna call them and email them and see if I can get an appointment, and then I'll get the information.
right. And
So
I'll
that's
hear
the
what
ABC.
they want me
Right.
to know. Yeah,
Yeah. But I love that A plus B equals C framework for a lot of board members who do fundraising because it is one of the biggest fears out there.
Mhm.
And Margaret can speak more to this in terms of what fundraising scares the bejesus out of a lot of board members. So
Yeah.
maybe you could say a little more
Well,
about
I think
this.
very little sends people faster into the drama over data.
Yeah.
The stories about money, about what it
Right.
says about you to have to ask for money, like all that past stuff just floods
Yeah.
people. Often I think that's what that specific fear of asking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Money stories are huge.
Yeah.
Money stories are
Yeah,
huge.
Yeah.
yeah,
They are, yeah.
yeah.
This word
So
confidence.
that.
But I also feel like again, there's more, people, it can be confidence. But
Hmm.
it can also, as David's saying, it can be like that feeling of being prepared enough or knowing enough. Like there's different
Yeah.
varietals around what people think of as confidence,
Oh yeah.
right? A
Yeah.
perfection, like I need to have my presentation perfect, or I
Yeah.
can't do this until da 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 da.
Yep.
And
And
after a
that's
while, it's just stalling.
exactly. Yeah. It's one of my favorite authors, John Acuff, says, perfectionism is just fear dressed up in a tuxedo. Like,
Except if your tie is crooked.
right? So what I always talk to with people about, because that's one of the saboteurs I talk about in my framework is perfectionism, right? So it's a time saboteur. It just destroys your time. And I always want people to recognize that there's no such thing as perfect at
Mhm.
all. Like even like when I worked in the space program, we never had to make something to an exact measurement because there was always a tolerance because you can't manufacture something perfectly to like a specific number. You can't measure it perfectly. So when I do work with the first responder community who is literally dealing with life and death situations sometimes, they say, we always need to aim for perfect. And I say, I'd like to gently challenge you on that because if you're always aiming for perfect and you never hit that standard after putting so much effort into it, eventually that can lead to burnout.
Mhm.
And what you need to focus on is instead of shooting for perfection, which is unattainable, is excellence.
Mhm.
Excellence is something that you can strive for. That's operating at a very high standard with the time, the resources, perhaps the budget that you have. And when you can shift that, it seems like a subtle shift, but it's very powerful. Instead of being perfect and no mistakes, to being like, okay, what's my criteria for excellence? Setting that criteria and then not continually moving that goalpost, that's when you can really feel like you're making traction in things.
Mm. Yeah, perfection doesn't work. If you're a first responder, uh, perfection is a huge saboteur because when you're confronted, and this is just in general in life for most of us who are up to something in the world, let's just
Hmm.
say, other than, living in a cave and drinking goat milk. Um, yeah. Um, when you're confronted with something that you've never, you may have trained, but it's not quite what you trained, and you have to deal with it in the
Hmm.
moment,
Yeah,
you can get paralyzed.
for
Yeah.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. And that's why getting the reps and I mean, and David, you and I talked, I'm a fellow martial artist with karate and the reason why you train so much and there's so much repetition is because when the pressure is on, whether you're in a hand-to-hand situation or first responder situation or you're making a decision about finances, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're not going to rise to it. What you're going to do is you're going to fall to your level of training that you've prepared for. So that's why it's very
Mhm.
important to get the reps in so it's automatic and you can respond without thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you're bringing in the martial arts metaphor. Um, I see this a lot even in my own academy, which is a very, we are a very high level academy, several
Mhm.
world champions, present company included. But what I see is once some athletes get to a certain level, they won't try stuff anymore. They keep
Mm,
playing the same, game, whether it's working or not. And so they can perfect that game, except, you know, like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a game until they get punched in the face,
yeah,
right? So, I mean, I like to, again, here's my word, experiment. Like when I have some strengths, I have some technique that, and trained it and drilled it, and it's in my body. It knows how. And then when I'm confronted with opponent who's doing something different,
Hmm.
I don't try to force my game onto that opponent doing his thing. I experiment. I can say, oh, well, oh, that's unexpected. Let me try this.
Right.
Now, sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. But then either way, I've learned something. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
next time, and I see it again, and I'll see it again until I figure out uh, what technique, how much balance, all the variables which
Right.
happen in a jiu-jitsu fight in a split second, just like in an ER room. Um, so I see folks unwilling to try things,
Yeah.
especially when they're confronted with um, a set of circumstances that they're not familiar with. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to just a basic function of the human brain and what keeps people stuck a lot. And if people can recognize this in their own life, and it happens at various stages of our life, is our brain loves to know what happens next, right? It doesn't like open loops, which is
Right.
why people will stay in a situation that is not serving them, even if it's an unpleasant situation at a primal level. If they just allow it to run on autopilot, their brain at least knows what to expect from said crappy situation, whether that's a relationship, a job, emotional, like
Mm,
that's why a lot of times they'll stay stuck is the brain knows, well, at least I know what's going to happen. Whereas once you start deviating from the normal, the brain kind of freaks out and, throws warning signs. It's like, we don't know what's going to happen here. Like, and that's terrifying. But once you can
mm,
recognize that and be like, okay, this is just my, primal warning system going off. Let me introduce my logical, prefrontal cortex brain and let's sort this through. So that's something I see a lot that keeps people stuck. And once they're aware of it, they're like, oh, this is just my survival brain trying to keep me safe, but it's working on primal information, not present day information.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah, there's something powerful. I mean the metaphor of the martial arts, which just continues to be a reminder about why perfectionism is such a problem
Mm,
because you can't ever predict, right?
yeah,
Like you can't predict what your opponent on the mat is exactly going to do, and you might think that you have something perfectly practiced, and then I don't know, it's a couple degrees too far this direction, or
yeah,
lower or higher or whatever. And it's
mhm,
so the
mhm,
same with public speaking, with talking to a donor. They might
mhm,
come up with a response, or you might lose your room in a way that you hadn't anticipated. And so this idea that we can adhere to perfection is kind of ridiculous, isn't it? When we
mhm,
start
yeah.
thinking about
It
these
is. It
examples.
is, and that's where it becomes important to really do the reps and be as prepared as you can. So whenever these curveballs do come, and they're going to happen, you're able to respond instead of react because reactions are
mhm,
just involuntary and like you're not thinking about them and but not in a good way. A
Yeah,
response is there's some intentionality behind it. Like,
yeah,
yes, David and I are trained to act without thinking sometimes, like in a physical situation, but that's not, I would argue that that's not a true reaction. It's just a very conditioned, very rapid response because there's
yeah. What are
intentionality behind
what
it.
are the equivalents, would you say, like for leaders? They're not doing
Sure.
push-ups. They have different things to
mhm.
train for excellence. So what do you counsel there?
Right. So raise your hand, listeners, if someone has ever said something or done something and you opened your mouth and words came out that you regretted. Who's all right? Yeah, right. Yeah. I'd say raise
Yeah,
both hands, but if someone's driving, don't do that. Yeah, right.
one
That's
hand.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great example of being able to really craft a response instead
Mhm,
of a reaction. Like a reaction is just when it's like, you just say the things, and this is when they're leaving your mouth, you might be like, ooh, that felt good. I gave it to them. And then you're like, bing, eyes open in the morning, like 2 in the morning, going, I should not have said that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's a great skill for leaders to practice where they just need to hit the brakes and halt and
Right.
collect their thoughts. And it might feel like it's an eternity, but I'd rather it feel like an eternity than say something because, words are like an arrow. It's like Psalm 127, the Bible says, when an arrow leaves the hands of its warrior, like it's gone.
It's it's
Right.
gone.
It's fly.
We used to have
Um,
the 10-minute rule in my office, which was
Okay.
I love that example because it was like that's everybody needs to work on this muscle. If you get an email that upsets you,
Hmm.
walk away from your computer for 10 minutes and then another 10 minutes and maybe you need 24 hours, but like that you don't ever be like, what? And you start,
Yeah.
typing away to
I'll show you.
yeah.
I'm writing in all
yeah.
caps.
Uh,
I'm gonna headbutt the space bar.
yeah. So that's a very granular like muscle to work
Yeah,
on.
for sure.
Take
Very
a few
powerful.
minutes. Keep,
Yeah.
sit on your hands, count to 10, any of those kinds of things. Yeah.
Hmm.
What are you thinking, David?
Yeah. Oh, so many metaphors were
Yeah.
coming to mind. I in our ever, speed, and I'm not talking about amphetamines, but it seems like a lot of folks, including leaders, are on speed, and speed is encouraged, and there's something to be said for that. But I'm fond of Stephen Covey's expression, with people, slow is fast and fast is slow.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Easy to remember, hard to practice. But when you do practice that, I, especially if you're a leader of a team, leader of an organization, I've learned even in my own life with my family, if I can slow down,
Yeah.
then things will speed up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a very similar mantra in the special forces community: slow is smooth, and then
Yeah,
smooth is fast. Yeah,
exactly.
to just get that smoothness built into it instead of
Yeah,
the herky
yeah,
jerkiness. But yeah, and like, yeah, man, that's a daily struggle for me. Right? Hit the
yes.
brakes.
It, even with all my practice in that area, someone, I'm in a course right now, and it's a spiritual development course, and the facilitator uh, wrote me an email that kind of triggered me, and my initial response was slow and thoughtful, and but then she kind of doubled down on this topic, and man, I, I I'm high D on the disc, so I just let fly with the very direct kind of response.
Mm,
And yeah, I did hit the send button, and I was like, literally like a few minutes later, I was like, oh, I need to amend that and just give
mm,
a little bit more context to
yeah.
that. And so, even when you're well trained, you're going to make a mistake, and
Yeah.
but you get, as Margaret and I say, leadership is messy, but you clean up your messes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Accountability, like like maintain that accountability with your team
Yeah.
and modeling that, that, okay, so I done screwed up, but that's not the end of the story.
Yeah, yeah. So, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate your patience with Margaret and me. Uh, we like to weave. I
That's
know
all right.
people in the audience may not like that expression, but we do weave. And it's been a wonderful weave. We've created a beautiful tapestry, and I'm curious if you have something that you'd like to give the audience to try.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked because it dovetails perfectly with what we've been talking about, especially coming back to that fundamental of slowing down and maybe even pausing. So I want to share my HITS framework, HITS, with your
Mhm,
audience.
mhm.
And HITS, the H stands for halt, right? This is a framework to put in place whenever like you just feel like your head is so cluttered, to really bring it back full circle to what Margaret was saying, like when at the beginning of the episode, where like if you just have so many things ping ponging around in your head and you're like, what do I do next? Halt. Like just
Hmm.
hit the brakes, man. Like and
Hmm.
just take a moment, and then the I in hits is figure out what's immediately important. And I know whenever I have something going on and I got a lot of stuff going on in my head, especially if it's stuff that maybe I'm scared to do, right? Or I have a lot of reservations, I'll do anything but that. Right? Like I'm on the home stretch of finishing my book. And I don't think my desk has ever been cleaner. Right? Because like there are things like I just had these mental blocks. Cleaning my desk is not immediately important. So you need to
Right.
halt. You need to identify what's immediately important. Really be honest with yourself and write that down. And then the T is take intentional action. Like, don't just be like, oh, yeah, I need to do that. It's like, no, let me take intentional action. And the way we take intentional action to make sure it gets done is the S in hits, which is set a specific deadline. Because just saying, I'll do that later, or I'll finish that final proofread this week, like no. Right?
That's a technical term.
Yeah, it's a metric term.
Exactly. That's it. That's from the metric system.
That's right. So because, whenever we don't anchor it in reality, like it'll just continue to flow. It's like, no, I need to hit the brakes. Okay, this is exactly what I need to do next. I've taken time to maybe you need to write it down. Maybe you need to write down the things that you aren't immediately important in a holding pattern so they don't get lost, but you need to
So
kind of
this
just
is
put them
just
out.
a backup. This is especially when you're spinning, right?
Yep,
This is what
exactly.
when you're mind. Okay, so you recognize first is the awareness. I'm spinning.
Yeah.
First, you have to realize you're spinning, and then H.
Halt.
Hold on,
Yep.
halt,
Yep.
and then what's immediately important, and then
Yep.
what are the last two?
Yep. So take intentional action,
Hmm.
right? Let's be intentional about this. Let's just not go, willy-nilly out there doing let's be intentional about it
Hmm.
and then set a specific deadline.
All right, beautiful. Well, we'll put
Great.
that in the. Go ahead, Margaret.
No, I just said great,
Oh,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
great. Well, we'll put
The
that in
opposite of
the.
this, the this.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yay! Not.
Instead of
There's your sound bite.
there's a sound bite. I don't know how that's going to come through on the
Yeah, I
recording,
think they
but
need context.
Yeah.
what do they call that when you like take your time? There's a word for that, Margaret. You're the writer when you the raspberry. Is that called a
I think that's
raspberry?
raspberry.
The
Yeah,
that
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's the
That's the
raspberry. Yeah.
raspberry. Okay. The we is I don't know what the we is the roller coaster.
Which I think Zoom's like muting it because it's too sharp of a sound. I couldn't hear
Maybe
it.
so. All right. Well, look, we'll put the hits framework in the show notes. John, where can folks find you if they want to, you know, get your book and
Yep.
learn more about you?
Yep. So johnmollura.com, JOHNMOLLURA.com. And right there, there's a tab for the Let It Fly book. So right
Mhm.
now they can get on the launch team and get the first 6 chapters of the book just emailed right
Mhm.
to them, get a sneak peek of the cover. And then there'll also
Mhm.
be information whenever it is available for sale in mid-September of 2026.
All right.
Great.
Well, Margaret and I know that feeling, so we're wishing you the best
Thank
with
you.
the book. I'm hopeful that it'll reach a lot of folks, and we will put your website in the show notes. And really, thank you for a lively and lovely conversation.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks. It was great to hang out with you, Margaret and David.
Thanks,
All
John.
right.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us and our listeners today.
Appreciate it. Bye bye.
All right.